Well, hello there. This is a test. Actually, we're trying to figure out whether or not this is working or if it doesn't work. I don't want to waste time to do it over again. But we're going to try. But I hope it works because I think I work really hard on this to make it work today. So, greeting to all of you watching this little video here. This is something that I had in mind for many years, I believe, but never quite having the know-how or all those things that I needed to know in order to bring this to reality today. And today is kind of like a little bit of a test, see what I'm doing, if it's really, kind of like, fix a little bit here and there, and then eventually we get to the right track and do it a better way. And I'm not a professional or anything like that. I'm just an amateur, but it can work. So what I wanted to do was I want to bring to you this program, and which is a little bit not too much entertaining, but more informative and more educational, and from a biblical standpoint. And the program, the title for this program, I love to call it Sit and Talk. Let's sit and talk about it. There are many things out there that we can sit together, having a very nice conversation, and we can talk about it. But today, I would love to begin this program with this very important topic, and that I think everybody kind of like wondering what's going on, because a lot of people they think they know, but in reality they don't know. But I'm going to get there to tell you exactly what we're going to. As a matter of fact, let me tell you right now, we're going to talk about the origin of man. Okay, the origin of mankind. Where exactly we came from. Okay, and then we're going to talk about the other aspect of that in the sense of philosophically, where we're going to ask the question where we come from, what are we doing here, and for how long we're going to be here, and then what's going to happen after we leave here, that kind of stuff. So for now, we're going to talk a little bit. We're probably going to have different videos, in this to tell us, to cover the whole spectrum of the origin of mankind. And so today we're going to begin with that. There's a lot of conceptions out there. There's also a lot of misconception. There's a lot of opinions. There are also a lot of, false information. We know that. But there are also some good informations out there too. And the problem is, for all of those misconceptions, false informations, and some of the things that we don't know, is because of where we get our information from. And I believe with all my heart, and for some of you, I think you believe that too, if you get the information, the right source, then, all the uncertainty and the problem that you think you have, or maybe the lack of information, all these things, or the lies, and it wouldn't be a problem for you today. And some people also, they think, I don't care. Well, why do I need to know where I come from? What does that matter to me? Well, you probably right in some way, but you would realize that you're also wrong, because there's a saying that says if you know where you came from, they might help you to know where you're going. And actually, what does that mean? It's give you purpose, and so a lot of people, they don't even know why they're here into this earth and everything. But I can understand there are circumstances happening, and every human being have different history and different circumstance that actually form their belief system and to be the person they are today. I'm going to try to not to step anybody's toes with information. Matter of fact, every time I come to you in the series of informations or teaching videos or audios, whatever it is that I present to you, I am not trying to elevate one group of people and trying to abase another group and trying to make me feel superior or trying to help some people feel good and others feel bad. I'm going to try to speak the truth to you as best I know how, and trying to explain to you also in the the simplest way possible that I can. I'm going to tell you directly right now, I'm going to be really open with you and very blunt. My source of information that I'm reporting to you, they're all coming from this big book right here we call the Bible. And so what I will be able to share, no matter what information I give to you in the next minute or so, the next hour, it's going to be biblically based. Okay? I may be able to use analogies. Which I will actually, without a doubt. I may be able to use real life, examples. But the authority of everything I will tell you is going to come from here, the Bible. So, how do we get to a place to understand where we come from? Okay, let me help you this right that way. They all actually come together. If you understand what I mean, everything trying to come together. The thing is, for you to be here as a human being, as a person, there's some I'd say kind of like loose word of what I'm trying to say here. There are certain elements that need to get involved here. Okay, the reason being is because there's not a human being on this earth that is self-created. In other words, you didn't bring yourself here. Okay, you have the first thing is, unfortunately, it's not true for everybody in a sense of discovering the ones that's supposed to be what I'm calling now your mother or your father. But the basics that you need to know, you come from a mother and a father. Okay, so there has to be these two elements taking place in order for you to be here. When we study anatomy of a human being, we realize it takes, for full maturity to have a baby after conception, 9 months. So the duration from conception to delivery, it takes a period of 9 months. Now, there are factors that get into the development of having a baby or a child that that will come into play without our beyond our control. That's what I meant to say, that the baby can come out in the mother's womb prematurely. We call it preemie, where at least 6 months or 7 months or 8 months. And also there are other reasons that a child or a baby in the mother's womb can take more than 9 months in order to come out. But these are circumstances. They're not I would say the time frame for that. But I think these are preliminary. Everybody is supposed to know a little bit of this. You don't need to know all the anatomy or the physiology and all those, I would say medical jargon about all these things. These are not that important for you in order to find out where you come from. Okay? And we see there, because of so many circumstances happen in life, now, this is my first example to explain what I'm trying to say. I have a good friend of mine that recently just shared with me that his older brother, Ben, known for all his life that he is the father of a certain child. And that certain child also have known for all his life, he's in his 20s right now, that he is the child of this man. But the man in question, the father, for many, many years, I believe from the beginning when he was made aware that he could be the father, knew that he wasn't. But they never, in a sense, scientifically prove it that he was not the father. In other words, they never had a paternity test. They never made any effort in order to prove whether or not he was the father. But he knew deep inside of him that he could not be the father because there are other men involved. But we're not going to get into the details, the reality of that person who had other men involved in this. But the fact of the matter is, for this moment right now, the example that I'm using is a good one, because this young kid, since he was a young lad, his mother told him, "This is your father," point out to the man. And so he never had any doubt. But as he grew up, because he realized this guy he has known for all his life to be his father, went along and get married and has his own family. And he's taking care of all his family, but he was left aside, never been taken care of as a legitimate son the way he's supposed to be. So for many, many years, like I said, now he's in his 20s, the doubt always there. A sister of that man, the father, the aunt of this young man who never knew that this guy was really his father, because been talking about this so many years, realized that maybe this man, probably he's not his father. So the aunt and another brother, which is a uncle, put together come together, and then they said they're going to have a test to find out whether or not he is the father. So that's what they did. So they took the uncle who was close to this guy, living, area geographically. So they came together and they went in the clinic and have a test, between them. So remotely, the result came out. There's not a thing close to this young man with the uncle to have any, link as far as, relatives. So that concluded that the man who've known long along that he could not have been the father of this young man was right. And it came out really clearly. But now this man, he had been told by his mother since he was a kid, this is the man who's been told. Now he felt a little relieved. The reason being is not because he found out, that this guy's not his father, but he was relieved because the guy who he thought was his father had taken care of him all his life. He wouldn't really be devastated because he would have wanted this guy to be his father. But he was relieved the fact that this guy never took care of him. So he felt relieved because the burden of having himself in this guy's life it freed him from the responsibility of being called a father, even though physically and socially, relationally speaking, he never been there for him. So now he's in quest now to find out who the father could be, who actually was. You see, the thing is now, there are two other men involved in that scenario. One of them died, many, many years ago. The only way they could find out is always find one is his children, actually, and also, to have a test to see if they have some relationship there, or the other one, which actually they have no clue where he is in the world. So there's no way for him to find out who his father was. So that's a circumstance that can happen. But for many of us, fortunately, we didn't have that problem. We knew that we came from a family. There was a mom and there was a dad. Okay, so we know for sure this person here is your mother, and this man here is your father. Okay, and then you can tell because you have the sibling, and you can tell the resemblance between you and your sibling, and also the man that you know is your father, and the woman that you know that is your mother. You're not any problem there, and you bear their signature and everything, blah blah. For other of you, you don't know your where we enter into scientifically speaking biological parents because you've been adopted. That's a different situation. And now there's a good source of information that's out there. I mean, kind of like a wealth of information about ancestry, and you can go online. I'm not making any advertisement for this company anyway. I don't know anything about them, and you can apply. And there are other ones also out there that can give you a range of information from where you are right now, all the way back to, centuries, of your origin and your ancestry, your great multiplied by time, great parents, all the way to your generation. And this is really good. Some of them you may have some famous people, in that you came from, your bloodline and whatever. But now, all these things we understand it from a scientific and biological standpoint, and they're all here to prove to you who your parents are, okay, and who your aunts, your grandparents, all these things you can find out, and that actually gives you a little peace of mind, and you don't have to worry about other scenarios, like some new discoveries, that kind of stuff along the way. Have you seen happen many times when one of those families, get to depart from this world, and then their inheritance they have, there's a lot of fight in order to part them, the different parts, to people left behind, and sometimes because of that we discover who the legitimate relatives and siblings are, and that kind of stuff. But that if you're not in those type of circumstance, everything, it's not going to be a problem. Now we know from that kind of ways. I mean, the scientifically, biologically, and that kind of fashion, understand who are your parents, and that kind of stuff. And you've been, or maybe you've been in foster home. You call these people parents, but that gives you a little bit of an understanding, who you are. But fundamentally, this is where the problem is. Okay? When we come to the reality of our existence, okay, in this world where you find yourself, wake up every single day, and you find yourself here, and you're looking around, you see everything that's around you. Fundamentally, you have an origin. Okay, that kind of explanation that I just gave you concerning your moms and that and everything, he didn't start right here. It started from the beginning. Well, unfortunately, we do not have the date when that started, but we know for sure that it started. Okay, and that's the reason why we're here. We're tangible proof, and we keep doing it over and over because we come to a point where we call this reproduction. We multiply after our own kind. In other words, we produce, we repeat exactly the same process that our parents, our great-grandparents did to come to us, and we keep doing it. So in other words, we in turn one day we're going to become first of all parents, and then grandparents, and then great-grandparents to infinity. Do you follow? So this is the kind of like the pathway, to get to the origin of where it came from. If you were to study the genealogy of your own, family, you will go back, generations, centuries, of generations. You find where you came from. You probably won't remember all the names and stuff like that. Now let's turn this to a different, view as to how, when we talk about the origin of mankind. Okay, for some people, they heard stories. They think there was what we call the theory of Big Bang theory. That's what they call it. As a matter of fact, there's a TV show. Again, I'm not making any advertisement for this. I have nothing to do with this. Called Big Bang Theory, but we're really not talking about what I'm talking about right now. It's just a different show, different kind of thing. But there is such a thing actually called a Big Bang Theory. What does a theory explains or entails? That they don't say it, but that's what they want you to believe. Oh, we don't know where we come from. And because what happened with them when they say that, it's kind of like, there's an explosion happen somewhere in time past, and then bang, everything, come to being. Well, don't be surprised to see that what I'm telling you right now is actually written in textbooks in schools, and from elementary all the way to university and colleges, they're teaching this. But that means mankind, for the most part, been, learning a lie. Information is false, because there has never been such a thing called the Big Bang theory. In existence. And besides, how could it be possible? Can you think about that? How could it be possible for something to go bang and then things come into being? But you never see that anywhere. Never happens. But yet, there are a lot of people who believe that. And they believe it as not simply because they think it's a good information. They believe them as their belief system. This is where their faith, reside on. This is what they think that makes them who they are. They don't subscribe to any other thing except that. But now, I want to share with you, something here from the sacred book, and so that we can have an idea, can discuss it, and so that we can talk about it in more details to see what the Bible says concerning our origin. Now, I'm going to put my glasses on so with that I can see better and to read this book. See, I'm reading from the book of beginning, called Genesis. And this is my own conviction. I'm not imposing that on anybody else. You can choose to find a different any kind of type of version that you want. I have my own conviction to believe that I am holding in my hand the authorized version of the Bible, the King James Version, the 1611 authorized version. I do not believe the other ones are more accurately translated than this one. I believe God have done a supernatural job and intervention in order to have in my hand here a copy of the original word. This is not the original word. This is a copy of it. Okay, so my own conviction is I believe the King James versions is the best translated version of the Bible in the English language. So I'm reading from that. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says, the title of this right here says the original creation. And it says, verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, I got to pause here because it's very important here that I make that clarification here before we go there. Who's speaking right here? So we got to understand that we enter into a play now. The first scene just opened in front of us, and then the first thing we hear in the beginning. So who's speaking? We know for sure God is speaking. Okay, He's giving us the information about the origin of everything that we can see today, including us. So when He says in the beginning, that did not include in the beginning of God for this is a different teaching, a different time we can spend together to talk about that. God is not talking about himself. He's talking about what it is that he's going to tell you from that point on. Okay, so we're going to hear everything that he's going to tell us when he says in the beginning. And he says that actually in the first verse. He says in the beginning, and then he inserting this big word here, God, and the verb follows that, created the heaven and the earth. What does that imply? It implies that before that, we didn't have the heaven and we didn't have the earth. So from that point on, when God says in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, it means there is a time that God had to create these two elements, heaven and earth. Now, verse 2, he says, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Very important here. We didn't have, in other words, if you were to use topography to measure, the land and that kind of stuff, you probably wouldn't have anything to do. We wouldn't have to any result, because the problem is the Bible says the earth was without form. So how can you measure something that has no form? Impossible. And it was void. And also the other thing, also there were darkness. What does that mean? The absence of light. We couldn't see. Even if you were to be able to look for something, we wouldn't be able to find it. It was dark, and also all over the place. And the Bible says also, the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. Now verse 3, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. So God just only look at the, so far in the creation that heaven, earth, darkness, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the deep. That's what the Bible says. And in verse 3, God decided, right now, let's bring clarity. Let's take away the darkness. Let's take away what is actually obscure. Bang. So we can see the earth, we can see also the heaven. Because they're all in dark. We couldn't see it. But God could. So he brought light, which is actually another way of life. Well, that's another discussion for another time. He brought light into existence. We see now in verse 3, it says, God says, let there be light, and there was light. So we see light came in by the expression of God's mouth, and then light comes into being. And God saw the light, verse 4, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness, which I explained a little bit earlier, that the darkness was present because of the absence of the light. Once the light comes in, the darkness dissipated. We cannot have both at the same time in one place. It's either or. So God took care of this. Since the beginning, God's taking care of the darkness, bring a light. Verse 5 says, and God called the light day, the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Okay? So we have a little bit of understanding now of the idea of day and night. Okay? Now, without going too deep into the discussion concerning darkness and light, but we can just talk about it a little bit this way before we get deeper in our discussion here today. When we see God called what we call darkness, it's simply the idea that it's not visible to see. It's not visibly for eyes to see. That's what we're talking about. Don't think about too much of, darkness concerning your heart, your other things. That's true, but we're not there yet. We're talking about something physical here. It's the idea we cannot see with our eyes. That's the darkness here we're talking about. The idea that if you were to close your eyes and then everything seems to be dark. Okay, there's no clarity, and if you were to be walking around, you'd be bumping in things, so you would trip on something and fall and hurt yourself. That's the kind of darkness we're talking about. Okay, makes sense? Very simple, nothing complicated here. And also, so God brought the light, and then he gives you the illustration to understand what it means by it, when he says, okay, now God called the light day, and he called darkness night. Okay, there's nothing magical here, there's nothing superficial here. It's simply a division between when it's dark, what it means, and when it light, what it means. Day and night. And then when these two things come to pass, we have the first day. What does that mean? It's gonna be a continual thing to arrive at the second day, the third day, and so forth. So we see the first day, God created the heaven and the earth. He also created the light. Okay, so we have the division between day and night. So now let's move on. Verse 6, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. That is very interesting, yeah? Because here's what he says here: let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let divide the waters from the waters. So what God is trying to tell you here, there are different type of waters. Okay, we know that from I would say, what's the science for this? When we talk about the things of the earth. Okay, my mind is not working perfectly. I don't know what happened. Anyway, so from a scientific standpoint, you know there are different type of water. We have salty water, what we call it the sea, and also there are rivers, and I think there are other. When you talk about all this, there are different type. And also, what God is saying also before that, God let there be a firmament in the midst of the water. What does that mean also? It created what we see when we look, we call it the sky. Okay? In other words, if you were to stand looking down the horizon, you only see the gray. During the day, it might be very, very blue, kind of, but the matter, as far as we can tell, I think it's gray and a little dark sometimes, depending on the time of the day. The reason we can see the clarity of it is because of the sun, which we're going to talk about